Do you ever just not like a game, but you never really know why? Like, on the back of your head while playing it, you think, man, everything works, but it's just not hitting. That was this game's experience for me. Forgotten but Unbroken is a game that, to its core, works. Everything about it works just fine. But I think it's just a game that's just not for me. Which is why instead of giving you the average review, I want to try to sell this game to you and explain my reasonings for why I don't personally like this game that much. It's not a bad game, far from it. I think the mechanics are genuinely interesting and I really like some of the ideas. It's just, I'm not a strategy guy. And a lot of the mechanics I feel like I would appreciate a lot more if I was into this type of game. So join me today as I hopefully explain well why I personally just don't care about this game. The story is mostly based off World War II, specifically the German invasion in Russia. I didn't really like the story mainly because I think the characters are just not really well established. Characters are a huge reason why I even like a story to begin with, so when your characters aren't really that interesting from the jump, it's gonna be hard to get invested, which is why I kind of stopped caring after the first 30 minutes. I think the game opens strong, and I very much think the whole presentation with the game and how it looks definitely sells the story. But it's like it has the elements of being great, but it's just not there yet, if that makes sense. Like, the intro cutscene has a lot of style to it. The cutscene looks beautiful, and I think the editing here is especially wonderful. But I don't really have much of a strong opinion on the main character off that intro cutscene alone. And you could say, oh, that's what you play more of the game with. But my issue is, when you're trying to do this thing where you're trying to get me invested immediately with the story, and you introduce me to a character without telling me much about him, how can I be invested, you know? The game plays similarly to any other tactics game you've played. If you played XCOM, this is essentially similar to that game. There are some cool stuff like the weapon familiarity mechanic, where the more you use a weapon, the more you get used to it. But I think my issue with that is more so it kind of limits on what can you experiment with. It's a cool idea in concept, but I feel like in execution it's kind of a little limiting, you know? I also just don't like the more randomized stuff with the game, like where if you get hit by an enemy, the player would just run away. That got really annoying. But there were some stuff I like for example, I like the idea of you actually having to position yourself in order to hit your enemy. I thought that was cool. And everything works, it's just, I'm not a tactics guy. I believe all of this would be way more interesting for someone who's actually into this genre, but unfortunately, I'm not. And I got extremely bored with this game after a couple hours. Maybe it was the more RNG stuff, and especially the base building stuff, which we'll get into in a minute. But it just kind of bored me after a bit, you know? I like the missions where you get to sneak around and kill people. You know, that was really cool. But again, it just kind of bored me. And I really think it's a me thing, not the game's fault. But while the tactics stuff I can just chop down to just not being for me, the base building mechanics is certainly not for me. Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope no one minds if I just not get too much into detail with this because, I don't really know what to say. You can build your base and send soldiers out to get more stuff for said base, and that's really all I really have to say. I didn't really spend too much time with this. I didn't know what I was doing, and I was just confused for most of the time, if I'm being honest. You can build shelters for your soldiers, and I believe you do get the option to build healing places for them as well. I just don't really know what I'm doing with this kind of stuff. And again, I just think this is meant for people who are more into these kind of games. Thankfully, the visuals are way easier to talk about. I think this game overall looks, fine. Environmentally, I think the game does sell you on the World War II aesthetic. But I think where it really lacks is just the colors, where it really looks kind of muddied and kind of ugly in certain places. The cutscenes though are very nice though. I really like how they look. It's very impressive for an indie studio to get the cutscenes down to such a beautiful level, you know? I think overall the way the game presents itself is very confident and I can appreciate that. Also, if you plan on playing this on your Steam Deck or any kind of Windows handheld, good luck! The game has no controller support at the time, and I don't know if the developers have said if they plan on adding any controller support, but I hope they do. Mainly because for someone who doesn't really like playing with a keyboard and mouse, it was kind of a bit overwhelming to use a keyboard and mouse personally, but that can completely differ from person to person, so what do I know. But if you do want to play this on Windows handheld, you can just plug in a keyboard and mouse, so there's that. So I'll just say it's playable. But overall, I think while this game works and has a lot of interesting stuff to it, I just think it's not for me, man. Which is why I just don't think it's right to put a score on it. I'm clearly not the target demographic for this, so why should I rate it so harshly simply because it's not my kind of taste? Because what I think this game has is very interesting. It just didn't leave me that invested for someone who's not really into these type of games. And while that sucks, I just kind of have to accept that fact, you know? So, if anything I've said or anything you've seen on screen has convinced you, I recommend giving it a shot. It's around $30 on Steam. I don't know if there's plans on bringing it over the consoles, but either way, I hope you enjoy it if you do plan on playing it. But personally, it's just not for me, and there's a reason why it took a while for me to really get through it, you know? Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the review, and if you like what you see, subscribe to Grown Up Gaming for more reviews, or stuff on just handhelds in general. But for now, I'm out. Bye.